Hi, and welcome back to the Emmy Awards. My name's Emi, for anybody who doesn't know who I am. This is my podcast where I talk about really anything I want once a week. My name's Emi. I'm 22 years old. I graduated from Kenyon College with an English major. If you want more background on me, I have 10 episodes worth of that. So this episode's going to be a lot more like, the last few have been kind of me talking about pop culture, me talking about like my opinions on things. This one's going to be more like story-based about my life, specifically about my mental health journey. So if you're interested in any of that, please keep watching. If you're more interested in pop culture stuff, I have a few episodes on Gilmore Girls. I have one episode on Gilmore Girls. I talked about Percy Jackson in my last one. I've touched on The Bachelor. I talk about a lot of that kind of stuff too, but I kind of wanted to finally do an episode specifically talking about my mental illness in more detail. I'm going to try to not be graphic or like anything like that. But I will be touching on mental illness and mental health and depression and suicidal ideation. So if any of those things are triggering at all, please feel free to skip this episode. Again, I won't be graphic. I will just be like, at this point in my life, I struggled with suicidal ideation, stuff like that. But yeah, so I've been like putting off making this episode for a while because I feel like I'm better at writing about my mental illness and my mental health journey, and not as good talking about it. And I didn't prepare any notes because I took a sporadic trip to Philadelphia yesterday, and everything got kind of messed up, and it's like 12:30 on Wednesday morning. So it's like it's late, and my brain's been all over the place. So I'm just kind of gonna talk about things chronologically, and if I forgot to talk about something, I'll mention it in another podcast episode. The reason I finally decided to do this episode now is because I've started breaking out, like my skin has. Don't worry, like it's relevant, okay? Just sorry, tangent. But and I was talking to my mother about Accutane, and my mother was like, they would never put you on Accutane now because of your like history with mental illness. But I hadn't been diagnosed with anything when they put me on Accutane. And, like, I don't think that Accutane caused my depression, but I also don't think it helped. Like, I don't really remember my childhood. It was kind of chaotic. I moved a lot. There was a lack of stability that I don't think was super healthy, and not in a way that my parents, like, meant it to be. And there are a lot of really positives about moving around a lot. Like, I got to experience a lot of really cool things. I lived in Brazil when I was, like, 12. Like, it makes for a fun life story, but I think it caused a lot of issues with just, like, my sense of stability and my ability to form relationships with people because I was moving all the time. So it kind of felt, like, pointless to make friends sometimes. I kind of struggled when I was younger to, like, make friends. Like, I remember elementary school was, like, fine for me for the most part. I always had my sister, because I'm a twin. So, like, elementary school wasn't bad for me. Like, it was manageable. And it was just kind of chaotic. And I got to a point where I think it was when my parents told me I was moving to Brazil where I was like, will I ever just stay in one place? And I think that's really, I mean, I always say I think Brazil was like the beginning of like a downward trajectory. But like I moved a lot, and I mentioned in another podcast episode that I remember this girl coming up to me in like third grade, and she was like, my mom said I need to be friends with you because you're new. I do also remember, this just came to me, but I remember this girl, I was friends with her when I went to Catholic school. I think it was my Catholic school. Or maybe it was at my other elementary school. I don't know. I was friends with this girl. Like, I thought we were friends. And then, like, months went by, and she was like, I never really liked you. I just felt sorry for you. Or stuff like that. Like, I didn't have, like, the most solid friendships. And the ones that I did have that were solid, like, didn't end up lasting too long because I moved away. And you can only keep in touch with people so well when you're, like, 7. Or at least I found it hard. I used to have, like, my best friend from my Catholic school's, like, phone number memorized, and eventually I just forgot it when I moved to Brazil or something. I don't know. I feel like maybe it'd be easier now with social media, but, like, I didn't have, like, an Instagram or a Facebook. I got a Facebook when I moved to Brazil, and I had to lie about my age to get it, because I was, like, 10. So yeah, I didn't have the most stable, like, relationships when I was a kid because I was moving around a lot. And I think it really caused, like, this, like, idea in my brain that things aren't really, like, permanent. Like, relationships with people aren't, and, like, where you live isn't. Like, I kind of always expected things to end. And I don't know if that's, like, the best mindset for a child, because I feel like, or at least for me, it became this thing where I was like, why am I getting attached to things? Like, it wasn't a thing of like, let me enjoy the moments I have. I was literally like, what is the point if I'm gonna move in 2 years? Like, it became that kind of mentality. And then I would still like make friends and like get like attached to things, but it would take me a moment to, like, open up and, like, adapt. And then, like, by the time I adapted, I only had a little bit of time to, like, enjoy the situation because I had to, like, adapt to a new circumstance. So, like, it was hard for me because I didn't have a ton of stability and I didn't have a ton of, like, friendships. Like, I always remember watching movies or TV shows where, like, a character grew up in the same house their whole life. And I thought that was, like, the dream. And I know other people might think it's so cool that I lived in different places and I got to live in Brazil. And it is cool, but it was just also very hard for me. Like, I think both of those ideas can exist at once. So, like, that's kind of like a cliff notes of, like, my background, okay? And then when I moved to Brazil, things started going downhill for me. Because, and I hadn't even, like, I don't think I was depressed yet, but it started, like, I had issues with, like, relationships, but I don't really feel like it started affecting my psyche, and, like, my self-perception and my self-esteem until I got to Brazil, and I just started thinking that I was, like, the worst person on the entire planet. And so even though I hadn't been diagnosed with anything yet, or gone to any kind of therapy or anything, like, I think in retrospect, like, it was really the beginning of, like, the low self-esteem that I developed that, like, fed so negatively into my depression. Because, like, one of the, like, core truths of my depression in my brain, even though I know it's, like, not true, like, one of the misconceptions, the lies that my depression tells me is just that I am worthless. Like, I feel like people have different kinds of depression sometimes, and my biggest thing is, like, I am worthless, and that is, like, it comes from, like, people. Maybe I shouldn't talk about, like, whatever, I'm going to, who cares? So being bullied and, like, all of that happened to me in Brazil was the beginning of me, like, of my negative self-talk and my negative self-perception. And it just kept getting worse from there. Like, when I moved back to the United States, And like, okay, I feel like I eventually like made friends in Brazil because like, you know, I was in theater and I had some sense of community, but I never really felt like truly safe with like the friends I had. It was like they liked me and I had one really good friend, but besides that, it was like the people I was friends with, like I was friends with them, but it wasn't, again, a permanent thing. It wasn't like, and it never felt like I could be like my entire self. It was always like, this is like temporary. This is like on the edge. Like it felt very unstable, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So like, even though I had friends, it was not like the kind of friendship I have today where it's like, I know if I mess up or I'm not my best self one day, like that doesn't automatically mean the person's not going to like me. And maybe that's just something to be said about like the kind of relationships you have when you're like 10 and 11. But I think when you haven't had any stable friendships for like the first decade of your life, experiencing that while also being bullied, like it's very hard because you just kind of feel like any love you receive or any like validation or any friendship is like conditional on you being like perfect, I guess. So it wasn't like the kind of friendship that I know today of like people just loving you and caring about you. So, and again, we were like 10 and 11, but like, whatever. So then I moved back to the United States, and people in middle school keep bullying me, further adding to my negative self-talk, my negative self-esteem. And other people in my family have been going to therapy, so, like, I don't want to talk about their journeys, but my point is, like, my mother was like, Emi, if you need to go to therapy, let me know. Like, it was, I have to say, I'm grateful in that it was never this thing of, like, I got to a point where I was, like, so upset and I felt like I didn't have anybody. It was like my mother was like, Emi, if you're struggling, like, let me know and we'll take you to therapy for a long time before I finally agreed to it. And, like, middle school was rough, and then freshman year of high school was rough because in middle school I, like, kind of, like, developed these, like, coping mechanisms of, like, one of them was, well, I'm smart. Like, no matter what else, I was like, I'm smart. Like, that was a thing I had that was like a positive of my self-perception and identity, so that even when the other stuff felt overwhelming of like, I'm annoying, I am ugly, I am horrible to be around, like any of those other negative ideas, at least I had one thing going for me, and that was that I was smart. And then I got to high school, and I went to a very competitive high school, and I suddenly wasn't, like, the smartest person there. Not that I was the smartest person in my middle school, but I was certainly one of the people who cared the most, because it's middle school. Like, not that many people cared, and I did because I genuinely always liked learning. And so it was really hard to get to high school and feel stupid and feel like, well, what the hell do I have going for me? Like, truly nothing. I'm not even smart anymore. And that was really hard for me. And at the same time that was happening, another defense mechanism, and, like, I always told myself that the people who didn't like me and the people who were so mean to me just genuinely didn't know me. Like, it wasn't, I was like, they don't know me. Like, they never have taken the time to actually talk to me. Like, this idea they have of me in their head that they don't like is not who I am as a person because they don't know me and I don't really even know that. Like, that was a thing I told myself. Because I was like, it's not like these people's opinions matter. Like, they don't know you, Emi. But then, freshman year of high school, I kind of lost all of my friends from middle school. And it was the first time that I like transferred over to a school with like a group of friends, and I really felt like good about the group of friends I had, and it was just really hard, and it was like a very frustrating falling out because I felt like I was trying so hard to be like, if I'm doing something that doesn't make, like, I felt like for a while I was trying to be like, please tell me what I'm doing wrong, because I don't want to be like hurting you or annoying you or like being a negative whatever. So like it was just really hard. And I don't know if I've said this on a podcast before. Sorry if I have. But I remember going into 10th grade and I literally said to myself, like, I am not here to make friends. Like, and I wasn't even into The Bachelor, okay? It wasn't a joke in my brain at this point. I genuinely was just like, I'm not going to make friends. Like, I need to get through high school and I need to get to college where I can find a community of people. But, like, this school is not going to be the place where I find a community. And I don't want to get to know people because then they're going to hate me. Like, anybody I get to know will eventually realize how horrible I am and will leave me. And I didn't want to go through that because I was like, I don't have the mental energy to do that and also do well in school. I'm like, I need to do well in school so I can get out of here. Like, that was my priority. And I did end up making friends with like upperclassmen within the journalism, within my journalism class and the newspaper and everything. And then eventually I did make friends my junior year, and I had a really solid friend group, like junior year to senior year of high school, and like it all worked out, and those kinds of friendships are like more of what I consider true, like, consistent friendship now. But it was just really hard because I got to high school and I was like, even the things that I've told myself that are like core truths about my identity, like the positive ones aren't even true. Like, I'm not smart, and like even people who know me don't like me. It was really hard for me. And that's when I started going to therapy. And the first therapist I saw, love her to death. It was just like talk therapy, very basic talk therapy. And I have mixed feelings about talk therapy now as somebody who's 22 and pretty in tune with her emotions. But when I remember something that talk therapy really helped me with when I first started was I used to just get sad randomly and I wouldn't know why. It was unbelievably difficult for me to be like I would just cry out of nowhere and I'd be like, why am I crying? Like, this doesn't make any sense. I was like, it doesn't make any, why am I, now I'm crying. But I would just get sad or like, and now I understand that it was like triggers or whatever. But when I was like a freshman in high school, it was like the end of my freshman year that I started going to therapy. But I just didn't understand like why I was randomly getting sad and why I was like I couldn't pinpoint why things upset me. And even when I like had an idea of why it was upsetting me, I couldn't validate that made sense. And stuff like that. So it was like talk therapy was really good for me because I was able to like understand my emotions. And I feel like for the most part, I'm really good at understanding why something upsets me. Maybe not in the moment, but if I feel sad about something, I'm really good at being like, why did I feel sad? How does this remind me of other things? And maybe triggering something from my past. Like I'm pretty good at understanding my feelings and talking about my feelings. And a lot of that started in talk therapy. And my first therapist actually recommended Kenyan to me. So it was like, which is very ironic and funny to me now. But that was very useful. And eventually I started doing CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. And I loved my CBT therapist. And that was really helpful for me once I felt like talk therapy wasn't doing enough, because I felt like I could pinpoint why I was feeling certain ways, but I wasn't able to like stop those patterns or anything. And honestly, for the most part, like, my mental health in high school, like, it wasn't good. It really wasn't, because my high school was not a great environment. And I feel like I wasn't able to, I was trying so hard to get through, like, everything that was happening in high school and, like, the toxic environment that my high school was, in my opinion, or at least for me and my personality. Like, I was trying to just get through high school and survive high school, that, like, I didn't totally dive into, like, my childhood and the ways that impacted me. And I also just, like, a big part of my negative self-talk is constant, like, invalidation. So I could just never admit to myself, like, that certain things had been traumatizing, because I was like, what do you mean that was traumatizing? Like, you're an idiot for feeling that way, which is so stupid to me now as an adult, because I'm like, trauma is just like something that is totally fine for one child is not for another. And yeah. So, like, I don't know. I feel like I wasn't able to, like, acknowledge that I had, like, experienced trauma as a child until I was an adult and I experienced trauma. And I was like, oh, like, okay. If that makes sense. I don't know what my point was. I lost my train of thought. But, like, I guess there were a lot of things I hadn't worked through, because I was just trying to survive high school, and high school was a constant shit show every year. I think the most depressed I was in high school after I started therapy was my junior year of high school. I think that was really when I started, like, struggling with suicidal ideation. And in retrospect, it just had a lot to do with, like, everything, like, at my school was, like, piling on. And I was, like, taking on, like, leadership positions while also taking, like, a bigger course load. And everybody was talking about college. Like, it was just, junior year was a very, like, stressful year. And senior year was less so, because I got into college early in decision. So even though my classes were, like, pretty much just as challenging as junior year, I felt like I had a path. Like, during senior year. Junior year, I was just like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. Like, where I'm going to go to college. Like, all of that felt up in the air. Especially because my parents didn't know. My dad didn't know if he was going to be transferred my junior year. That was, like, up in the air of, like, I remember talking in therapy about, like, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to go to Kenya, because, like, my parents might not afford it if my dad just transferred to Brazil, and all this complicated stuff. So, like, junior year was just very overwhelming, and in senior year things felt more, like, settled and, like, in place, and my friend group was a lot stronger, and it was, like, generally better. But, like, junior year, I really remember, like, feeling like I couldn't do it anymore. Like, it was all too much. And I got through it because I was in consistent therapy, and I had things motivating me. Like, even though things felt kind of, like, confusing, at least, like, I saw a future, and I had, like, responsibility on the newspaper that made me feel, like, confident about myself. Like, there were a lot of positive aspects of junior year that kind of, like, overwhelmed and made the hard parts manageable. I do remember, I don't know if this was, like, when I was a sophomore in high school or a junior, but at some point I remember I think it was when I was a sophomore, because I think I was still seeing my first therapist, but I started, like, I went for an intake to do a group therapy, like, thing. That group therapy honestly ended up being low-key horrible because it was just me and this one other girl, and she never talked, so it was literally just me talking, and she would just, like, pipe in sometimes. And then she would just color the whole time. And I just, like, and I swear to God, I don't know if it's because I talked more than her, but I felt like the therapist liked her better. Like, I'd say something, and then, like, I guess maybe in retrospect, she just was trying to get her to participate too. But I felt like I would say something, and she wouldn't even acknowledge it. She'd just be like, Susie, I don't know what her name was. But, like, she'd, like, say the other girl's name was Susie. She'd be like, Susie, how do you feel? And I was like, Emi just talked for like 5 minutes. No thoughts on Emi's contributions. Like, at least I'm talking. So, yeah. Like, it's not like I was trying to hog the like, the airtime. I would just talk, and there'd be like, she would ask a question, and then I would answer it, and then the other girl wouldn't even say anything. Anyways, which is, like, fine. Maybe she, I just think it was weird because it wasn't, like, an actual group. It was me and another, like, person. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm in a group therapy now, and it's, like, a good amount of people because just, like, one other person is, like, awkward. Like, I don't know why anyways. It really wasn't helpful because I wasn't, like, the group therapy I'm in now is really helpful because, like, other people will share, like, things that happen to them, and it's really validating to be like, oh my God, I felt this way before. And then also, like, hear how people are, like, learning to deal with things effectively, and there's, like, conflict, and people are like, this is how I dealt with it this time, which I wouldn't have been able to do a month ago without these skills. Like, it's really, you get input from a variety of different people who have lived completely different experiences of, like, how they handle distress and stuff like that. And it's really great. Like, this was just not that. But anyways, when I was doing the intake for this group therapy, and it wasn't like DBT or CBT. Like, I don't even remember. It was just like group therapy. I remember it was an intake. So I, like, shared, like, my childhood and everything, and I just remembered there was, like, a pause, and she goes, that's an awful lot for somebody your age to have experienced. And I started crying because nobody had ever said that to me before, and I had felt like for so long, like, everything that I felt like was so hard to experience, and everything that had, like, been so overwhelming for me, it was, like, not that big a deal, and I needed to, like, get over it, and I was being dramatic, and it was really nice for somebody to be like, that's a lot to handle, and, like, and I still think about that, because it was really meaningful for me. The woman who did my intake didn't end up being the group leader because she went on maternity leave, and I was so sad. I think that was part of the reason I never really liked that group therapy, because I was just thinking about that other woman who validated me. Ugh, miss her. Don't even know her name. But it meant a lot to me because I hadn't experienced that. But anyways, by the time I graduated high school, also, I'm not going to talk about medication stuff just because I don't want to. I also didn't like my psychiatrist in high school. So, yeah. Also, like, I'm on SSRIs. Like, yeah. I take Zoloft. I'll just say that. I didn't always take Zoloft. I took Prozac. Anyways. And then I took Zoloft. And I've taken Zoloft ever since, and I love her way more than I ever liked Prozac. Fuck you, Prozac. I'm sure it helps some people, okay? I just don't like Prozac. It wasn't good for me. But anyways, what was my point? Oh, by the time I graduated high school, and I feel like I've touched on this, I had such high hopes for Kenyon. Like, I think my hopes were a little too high in the sense that I didn't go into it realistically being like, if it's hard at first, that's okay. Like, it was hard, and I was like, this is the end of the world. And I know now that that's an unbelievably unhealthy way to approach something, is like this all or nothing. Like, if it's not perfect, then, like, it's a catastrophe. But it's just, it felt like it was a thing that kept me going for so long, of like this like thing, this freedom, this new community I would finally belong to. Because a big like problem I had, and something that was really caused by like the moving around a lot, was I never really felt like I fit in anywhere. And not in the like I'm a weirdo Jughead Jones monologue type way, just in the type of way that I never really felt like I had the chance or opportunity to like be part of a community for like more than 2 years. Like I'd go to a school for 2 years and then I'd move, and these kids who like got to know each other for years and years, like I never had that. And it was hard because it felt like every school I went to, the people had that. And then when I finally did have that, my friends ditched me. So it was just really hard. It was really, really hard. And I got to Kenyon. Well, okay, no. When I graduated high school, this is important to say. And this is why I always give the advice to people who are specifically Kenyon, because I can't talk about the mental health resources of any other college. I can only talk about what I've experienced. But like I'm sure I could talk about like statistics and like ratios and stuff like that, but I feel like a counseling center on paper isn't as important as like the lived experiences of the people who've gone to the college. So I really only feel comfortable speaking on like my experience at Kenyon. But when I graduated high school, wait, I was saying something before. Oh, this is why I always tell people that it's so important, specifically people who are interested in going to Kenyon. If you struggle with some kind of mental health issue, go into your like college experience with some kind of treatment plan, because I had like a treatment plan in my head, but I didn't know like the policies at Kenyon. So when I went into Kenyon being like, okay, I'm going to set up a weekly appointment, that wasn't possible for me. And at that point, I was just trying to adjust to college. I didn't have time to like try to seek outside care. And I think if I had done what I did going into my sophomore year, which is I researched therapists in Columbus, I had an intake scheduled with the therapist like the first week of sophomore year, and then I saw her all the way until like the end of the first semester of junior year when she she left her practice. But I wish I had done that going into my freshman year of Kenyon, because then I would have had a backup if like the counseling center didn't work for me, which it didn't, but I didn't have any other options. And it was really hard for me. So I think, and it goes to like any kind of like disability or chronic illness, like have a plan and know what kind of accommodations you'll need, and don't be afraid to ask for them and stuff like that. Just have a plan and like be like, what will make college the most accessible for me? But I feel like I just a lot of it is stuff like that I wouldn't have known, but I wish I had done more research, and I wish I had had a therapist going into Kenyon. Because like the counseling center just wasn't working for me. I'd been going to therapy for like a while, and the like options felt more like counselors, like the kind of counselor I would talk to like if I went to like my high school counselor. And that was just not the kind of treatment I needed, because I needed to like come in with a problem and then like break down why I was feeling that way, and then come up with the solution and like a skill to stop like that pattern of behavior, or like to improve my I needed like concrete things, and I didn't feel like I was getting that. It was just kind of like I would say how I was feeling, and honestly, it wasn't even like they were that validating. It was just like, I didn't even feel like I was going, and my problems were being validated. Like I felt like I was going, and I was trying to be like, I am depressed, and they were like giving me like like, I don't know. I had a counselor at Kenya tell me that if your body, like, if you smile more, like, you make it if you make a purposeful effort to smile, like, once a day, your body will start to feel happier. And it's like, I took AP Psych, okay? I know that. That doesn't, like, concretely help me, like, make progress into feeling part of the community. And I honestly feel like I personally, well, maybe it's because whatever, but I feel like I have better advice for people who are trying to feel part of the community than I got at Kenyon my first semester. Like, I didn't feel like any of it was helpful to me. So it was just hard. And then it just kept getting worse. It just kept getting worse. And yeah, I've talked about it a lot. I've written about it, but I don't know. Whenever I get to this part of my story, or the story, I'm like, I don't know, how much do I want to say? But anyways, I'll link my op-ed, my article, all of that below if you don't know who I am and you're like, what is she talking about? But anyways, I had a mental health crisis. I was hospitalized. Kenyon didn't want me to come back. I was like, leaving isn't going to help me. They let me come back. I left a party crying, and I got campus safety called on me because that was what my friends had been told by the college to do if they were ever worried about me. And this was like the first time I cried after like my mental health crisis. So obviously they were like, okay, we'll call. It was also a Friday. So like, anyways, so like they called campus safety, and then the next day Kenyon basically tried to kick me out. Okay. Like, they tried to kick me out. They called my mother to have her move me out. And I walked in basically just, like, ambushed by, like, a group of people. And my mother, like, an intervention being like, you cannot go to Kenyon College anymore. And it was just totally the wrong reaction. It was just totally the wrong reaction to me already struggling, because I felt like I wasn't part of the community. And then Kenyon was basically like, yeah, you're too depressed to be part of this community. And by Kenyon, I mean like the institution and the administrators who were enforcing a policy that I believed is discriminatory. I'm not talking about every single Kenyon student or every single Kenyon professor when I say Kenyon. It's just because I don't think it's effective for me to be like this administrator. But it was just like, because regardless of who was the person delivering the message, it was like a policy that Kenyon was trying to enforce so they wouldn't be liable if I died on their campus. And it didn't make me feel good. It made me feel like I wasn't a person to them. And all I wanted was help adjusting to things and proper treatment for an illness that I was dealing with. And I knew for myself that leaving Kenyon wasn't going to help me because I was having trouble adjusting. And the fact that I was mentally ill, or am mentally ill, made it harder for me to adjust and made the painful parts of struggling to adjust 10 times worse, because it wasn't just I'm having a hard time finding a community. It was, oh my God, this validates this deep-rooted insecurity I have that I'll never be able to belong anywhere, not even to this place that I've been wanting to go to school at for like years. So obviously, like, it was amplified by the fact that I was by my mental illness. But like at the end of the day, leaving was not going to help me adjust, because leaving wasn't going to cure my illness. if I took a semester off, I wouldn't come back and magically be less depressed. Like, I needed treatment, but I needed treatment while also adjusting to the college. Removing a student from a situation they're having trouble adjusting to isn't really going to help, because when they come back, they're going to have to adjust anyway. Like, a college to try to make the institution more accessible for the student, not make the student leave and be like, fix your problems and be, because what it says at the end of the day to the person is that you have to be not mentally ill, or not visibly mentally ill or outwardly mentally ill, to be a part of this college and function properly within this community. And that is so damaging to tell somebody, even if it's indirectly, because that's just not true. And frankly, it's ableist. You might need a little bit more time. You might need accommodations. You might need help because you're struggling with this thing, but you struggling doesn't mean that you can't go to college. My depression made college harder for me, but what made Kenyon an especially hard place to be was that I felt like I didn't deserve to be part of the community because I was depressed. And when you're already struggling with like suicidal ideation and depression, feeling like that makes you a burden, or that makes you less deserving of a resource or a place in the community, is just unbelievably damaging to your like psyche and your mental, like it's fucked up. And I'm not saying this is like unique to Kenyon. I think mandated leave policies and the way that colleges often treat like mental health crises are in this capacity. And I just think genuinely that needs to change, because it's not helpful. It's not helpful. It's not. Mandating a student leave because they're in crisis doesn't help. Like, it doesn't help. And it can cause more harm. But anyways, I lost my train of thought again. But yeah, that really fucked me up, and made the way I view my mental illness and being depressed and my depression 10 times worse. 10 times worse. I feel like 10 times doesn't even begin to describe like how much it fucked with me. Because I felt like I couldn't talk about it. I felt like I couldn't say, like, I feel like I can't fully explain how much that impacted me, because even though it's like 4+ years in the past now, and I've written about it and I've processed a lot of it and I've healed from a lot of it, I think there are some parts that I haven't fully, whatever. It's just hard. It's really, really hard. And I feel like somewhat past it now, because I graduated and I did like feel part of the community by the time I left, and I felt very loved by Kenyon, and all of the things that I felt were validated by the way the college treated me have been completely like overshadowed by the amount of love I felt. And I've also, in writing about my first year and in writing about the lack of mental health resources on campus, and the fact that this has been an issue for long before I got to campus, it's been really nice to hopefully use my pain and use this horrible thing I went through to push for change. I don't know if it will ever, like, if it's going to change, but I hope that it does. And I genuinely hope that administrators at Kenyon read the stuff I've written and try better and do better, because it's not okay. It's not okay. And I know it's not specific to Kenyon, but I can only talk about what I've experienced, and I didn't expect to cry in this episode, but I had a shitty experience with a therapist in 2020 that I'm not really super like in the mood to talk about, but the ironic part is that she used to work at Kenyon, and then she left Kenyon, my shitty therapist, and then she was like, she has a practice in Mount Vernon or whatever, and she took my insurance, and she was familiar with Kenyon, and it wasn't all the way in Columbus, so I was like, this seems like a good therapist, and it was just not good. Like, I met with her for 3 months, and it ended horribly because she made me feel horrible about myself. Yeah. One of the things that was particularly like horrible about the way it ended with her is that she told me, because I had attempted suicide before, that I was probably going to do it again, and so I was a safety risk, and she didn't feel comfortable treating me. And that was just really hurtful because I hadn't expressed like suicidal ideation or even thoughts of self-harm in the time that I had been seeing her, and it was simply based off of like the most traumatic thing I'd ever experienced. Like it, I spent so long trying to not let like that worst moment of my life like define me, and it literally impacted my entire Kenyan career. To just have somebody kind of, I don't know, it felt like she was like using it to define me. And it's just hard to like feel like you can never move past like something like that. And then after that, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't have a shitty therapist. I had a really good therapist that I mentioned from like sophomore year to the middle of junior year. And then with COVID, I didn't really, I tried Talkspace or whatever Kenyon offered us for free during the beginning of the pandemic. I tried that, and it was like not super helpful. And then I saw a therapist temporarily over the summer when I lived in Evanston virtually. And then in the fall of 2020 is when I saw this therapist. And then I think the last appointment I had with her when it ended really horribly was like January of 2021. And after that, I was like, I need something else. And I found a DBT specialist in Columbus who was doing virtual sessions. I did an intake with her. It went amazing. And I've been in DBT group ever since. And it's done me a world of good. I am over a year clean with in terms of self-harm. So that is really nice. So yeah, I've like it's been really, really wonderful for me, and I love my DBT group that I'm in. And even like really hard parts of last semester and everything that's happening now that's been really hard, it's nice having that consistent source of like talking about things and processing things, but also learning things and learning how to better cope ahead. It's been wonderful. I cannot speak any higher of DBT therapy, specifically group therapy. It's been great. I love my group therapy. And that's kind of where I am now in my mental health journey. Yeah, I ranted a little about Kenyon. Didn't think I was going to, but hey, it's part of my story, and it's, yeah, I didn't think I was gonna cry. I really didn't. I don't know. But I'm not sorry about it. I don't really mind crying. Anyways, I guess the reason I wanted to film this is not to like dump like whatever, like not to do like a therapy intake or like talk about all my problems, but just because one of my biggest passions and hopes in life is to be able to contribute to the destigmatization of talking about mental health, and specifically about talking about mental illness, because I think there's a lot of people focus on mental health and it's like self-care and like getting proper sleep and like being mentally healthy along with like physical health. And I think that's really important as well, because I think people haven't always given mental health the same weight as physical health, and I think it's really like wonderful that people are starting to do that now. But I also think that sometimes when people talk about mental health and like destigmatizing that, I feel like they're not necessarily talking about destigmatizing mental illness. And it's really hard. It's really hard to live in society and like feel crazy and feel like other people think you're crazy, and to just struggle with these really like hard things and then feel like other people treat you like a burden, like a liability, instead of just like a person who's suffering. Or not necessarily suffering, but just doing their best, and managing sometimes not as well. But yeah, it's just, I think people need to be more aware. And I even need to sometimes as well. Be more aware of how you talk about people with certain disorders or certain behaviors or whatever. I just think people need to be cautious, be aware, be compassionate. And if me talking about things I've experienced in any capacity can help somebody feel less alone or help somebody change their perspective on mental illness, psychiatric care, any of those kind of things, that's important to me. It really is, because I know what it feels like to be othered because you are mentally ill, and to be shunned or like made to be ashamed for what you're going through and to be silenced. And I understand all of those feelings, and it messes you up. It messes you up. And I just want to validate other people who are going through similar things or entirely different things. Because it's hard, and feeling guilty for feeling sad is never good, and it's never productive, and it's never helpful. You have the right to feel sad, even if you think it's about something stupid. You have the right. Your feelings are valid. Maybe they're not coming from the most logical place, and it's important to check the facts and like make sure you're not feeding in to like lies about yourself. But you're not crazy for feeling a certain way. You're not, I don't know. I don't want to be a therapist. Now I feel like I'm going to say something and it's not going to be right. But I just, if there's any, like in any capacity, I can make somebody feel more alone, or hopefully in the grander scheme of things or whatever, grand scheme of things, like change mental health policy, not like individually me, but like inspire like changes in mental health, the way people talk about mental illness and the way people approach students who are struggling with mental illness and any of that, that would be great. Because all I want is for people to not have to experience the same things I did. I never want somebody to feel the way that I felt my first year at Kenyon. I don't want somebody to feel like their illness makes them less deserving to be at their college, because it doesn't. It doesn't make you less deserving. And it wasn't right that I felt that way. And it wasn't right how I was treated, but hopefully talking about it can prevent it from happening to somebody else. Well, I'm sorry that this episode was so emotional. But thanks for watching. Please make sure to like, subscribe, share this with anybody you would think would be interested. I don't have an Emmy Award to give out today because I'm like emotionally drained from talking about that. Thanks if you like kept watching the whole thing. Do you want to share your story or reach out to me privately and talk about anything? My ears are open. I might take a little bit of time to reply to things because sometimes with things very serious or heavy, I don't want to make things worse, and I need to like make sure I am coming with the most calm, compassionate perspective, because sometimes things just make me sad and I can't think logically and be of any help. But anyways, thank you so much for watching this. Please make sure to like and subscribe, share, turn on your notifications, follow me wherever you listen to podcasts, follow my social media, follow me on TikTok, any of those things. Please and thank you. Next episode, no idea what it will be about, but it'll be something not as depressing. Maybe it'll be some pop culture thing again. I don't really know. I kind of just talk about things that pop into my head. And this has been something I've been wanting to talk about because I've touched on like stuff, because when I talked about like going to Kenyon, I mean, like my mental illness has shaped a lot of my adult life. So like obviously I've touched on it, but I just wanted to talk about it more in detail. Yeah, because I think it's important to talk about therapy and destigmatize it and all of that. But anyways, I've gone on for almost an hour. Like and subscribe, all of that. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.